Germán did not only live in Australia, but he's been around the world, and he's a reference, a world reference when we come to genomics, genetics, especially with regards to vegetable and animal health. And we have asked him to support us. Let's listen a little bit more about the background of Germán, our visitor, who's coming from so far away, but he's here back in his country land. Germán Spangenberg is an agronomist from the University of the Republic. He obtained a postgraduate degree at the Max Planck Institute in Germany and carried out a postdoctoral research in Switzerland. He was a professor at ETH Zurich, where he obtained his PhD in science in agrobiotechnology, and at Agriculture Victoria in Melbourne, Australia. He has held positions as Director of Plant Genetics and Genomics Research, Chief Scientist of the Plant Molecular Breeding Cooperative Research Center and the Dairy Futures Cooperative Research Center. He's Director of Dairy Buy-in and Director of Dairy Feed Base. He was the Director of Agriculture, Victoria Research, Professor of Plant Genetics and Genomics, and Director of the School of Applied Systems Biology at La Trobe University. He was Director of the Agri-Bio Center for Agri-Bioscience. Some of his awards and honors: Emeritus Professor of La Trobe University, member of the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, former President of the International Plant Biotechnology Association, and he received the Australian Thinker of the Year Award and the Public Service Medal for his outstanding public service through scientific research programs in the agricultural sector in Victoria. Thank you very much, Shamandu. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be back home. Science and technology have always been at the core of the human development of food production. We are living in a time of discovery like never before. Many of those discoveries, especially those that have to do with genomics technology, are finding today applications not only in agriculture for food production, but also in the industry and in health. And they are contributing to food security in a changing environment. It's very important to say that they are preparing us for the challenge of satisfying a global demand that will grow from 35 to 56% by 2050. So with that in mind, the industry in Australia has developed a strategic plan to grow the sector of agriculture, forestry, and fisheries to have a value of $100 million by 2030. And the starting point of this situation at the beginning of the decade, it's a total value of $71 billion. If we continue with the same trajectory as in the last decade, the growth of 1.5% annually, we would reach 2030 with a total value of $83 billion. That means that we must double the rate growth per year in what's left of the decade, from 1.5% to 3% annually, in order to reach that objective, which is quite ambitious, but it's achievable. All of this is important because we must consider the real impact of climate change in the Australian agriculture area. These maps of Australia show the maximum temperatures since 1910 until today, and we can see an increase in the maximum temperature by 1 degree centigrade in the last 3 decades, and also a reduction of 28% of rainfall during the growth of wheat plants. And that means that in the last 3 decades, we've seen a reduction of 27% of potential returns of wheat. In spite of this, given the development and adoption of technology that have compensated this reduction of the yield, this has allowed us to continue this trajectory of 1.5% of annual growth. I would like to share 5 innovations in agrobioscience from Australian scientists in Victoria, Australia. And they are building, transforming, and contributing to food security context. One is genomics applied to accelerate scientific improvement. 2 is applied genomics for adaptation to climate change. 3 is genomics applied to mitigate emissions, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 4 is genomics to reduce inputs and expenses, also emissions. And 5, it's genomics in an agrobio industry with an objective of contributing to public health. The first is the invention of genomic selection. This is a technology that does not involve genetics technology. It allows us to double the genetics gains, sometimes to multiply it by 5. And we could have a new trajectory trying to double the annual rate growth that we saw in the last decade, given the adoption and development of technologies. This technology is making a revolution of genetics in food and animal health. We use for genetics improvement in grains, wheat, barley. We have here for pastures, for milk cows, beef cows, also industries, more recent industries, such as cannabis for medicine purposes. The second example is about that narrative of the increase in temperatures that we've seen. I'm going to give you an example regarding dairy farms. We have about 100 and 120 days when cows are exposed to heat stress. This is in Australia. We have 4 consecutive days of heat reduces 40% of milk production and a reduction of 10% of milk in the rest of for the cows. So in this scenario, we see a loss of 40 billion liters of milk. So scientists in Victoria applied capacities to connect data with bio-IT, different information of data. They put them together. They developed the first genomic breeding values. They connected millions of records of information regarding temperature and humidity in 150 meteorological stations around Australia, connecting that with millions of production records of milk, of thousands and thousands of cows, with 3.5 billion of variations and molecular indicators of DNA, a very large number of genotypes, and we developed the first genomic breeding values in the world for the tolerance of heat in milk production. The dairy farmers in Australia have access through their smartphones to all of this. The third example is about the greenhouse emissions. Not only adaptation, as I said, adaptation to heat, but also to reduce emissions. And in one farm, in a dairy farm in Australia, 60% of the emissions are from methane. One way of reducing the carbon footprint of milk is applying genetics improvements, including genomics, and that allowed us to develop these millions of liters of milk, and last year more than 9 billion liters of milk. And that is all done with the same amount of animals. So the intensity of methane, a number of methane produced by liter of milk is 33 grams of methane in 1980, and today it's 20 grams of methane. That means that we reduced 40% in the carbon footprint in the milk that Australia exports. The fourth example is not only to consider the intensity of methane, but also the total production of methane, and also the reduction of production expenses. So a new genomic figure for improvement, the first time in the world that we developed this was what we called the feed safe. Food saved. And this allows us to choose animals that will produce the same amount of milk, consuming less food. So the reduction of food per year and per cow is 100 kilograms of dry materials, and if we apply genomics to improve the survival in the herd and also to reduce 34% in the production of methane and a reduction of 46% in the intensity of methane. Fifth example is considering a very important threat that we have, which is the antimicrobe resistance, especially bacteria that have become resistant to antibiotics. In 2019, before the pandemic, all around the world, we had 1.3 million deaths because of resistance to these microbiotics, and a lot of deaths regarding antimicrobial resistance. Nearly more important than any other diseases, because it's much more mortal, much more lethal. So what we did was apply a comparative genome with different mammals that we have in Australia. We have a marsupial there, we have a kangaroo, and a platypus. So what you must be wondering, what is he talking about? But, well, this is what it is. This is the experiment that we had. We have here a wallaby. He's born with an embryo with absolute dependence from mother's milk. It does not have an immune system developed when he is born, and he is exposed to pathogens from the marsupials. So the mother's milk has components that have the capacity to complement and to fight the microbiotics. And when we compare genomes from the platypus, the kangaroo, and the possum, we found 14 genes that are antimicrobiotics and 8 of these come in the platypus. We see a great diversity. This has happened throughout more than 11 billion years. This has been the evolution. And we've seen that we have lost a lot of diversity in all of this time. One of the most powerful we call the Pepto Wallaby Microbiotics 1. It is resistant to multiple antibiotics. It's even more powerful. It's 12 times more powerful than ampicillin, 10 times more powerful than tetracycline, and 26 times more powerful than chloramphenicol. So, if we have the chance to use these peptides in an agro industry, we can contribute not only to animal health, but also to public health. These examples that I gave you have to do to increase value and reduce expenses. This is something that Mario also mentioned, and it's the food waste that we have in societies. In Australia, we lose 7.3 million tons. We have 7.3 million tons of food waste. That's what we have in Australia. And if we look at this throughout the supply chain, 34 of these are household waste, 31% is primary waste, and 34% is manufacture. So as consumers, we play a very important role to fight against this problem. We also had more than 5 million Australians who suffered from food insecurity in the past 12 months of the pandemic. So, apart from the agricultural plan for 2030, to increase the production of agriculture, fisheries, and we have a plan for 2030 that has the objective to be socially unacceptable to have waste of food. We have to reduce the waste. We must maximize the value of raw materials and natural resources, and also reduce the environmental impacts of production of food and also of waste management. And that has a very important logic with regards to economy. We could have an opportunity of having 25 billion Australian dollars of value added. And I will finish with 3 comments regarding opportunities in the application of agrobioscience in Uruguay. One is to genomize all the improvement programs for animal and vegetable genetics, applying in a routinely way these genomics. 2 is to establish a framework and the capacity to have big data analytics that will allow us to have a synergy. There are databases that are diverse, and we have dispersed sources so that we can carry out these activities, as I said in number 1, and also to accelerate the development and implementation of precision agriculture. And 3, to relate biophysical models of the growth of harvests and also connect them with genomic predictions of activity 1 and thus facilitate the development of predictive agriculture. Thank you.